Good afternoon and welcome to episode 59 of the Jacksonian from yours truly, Jackson Johnson. And I have with me as the staff writer of Irish Breakdown, the one and only himself, Trevor Trowbridge, as we go over our take on Notre Dame's path to the national championship, the national title preview, score predictions, Marcus Freeman, the people, whether they're upset about Notre Dame not being in a conference or not. We're going to go over it all. And let me tell you something, folks. It's going to be a wild ride. How you doing today, good buddy?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me on. I mean, you're an Alabama fan, so I know that you understand what it's like being in national championships year in and year out. But for me, this is first national title game I've gotten to watch since 2012, and so I'm pretty pumped up. I'm glad I'm on here to talk about this, or else I'd just be pacing around my living room floor, bothering my wife about something, talking to her about something about the game that she's just not ready to hear about until Monday. So I'm happy to be on here, man.
Well, I'm glad you came on for the 59th edition of the Jacksonian. It's an honor talking with you. And we are live not only on YouTube but on X for this edition of the episode. And it's going to be a fun one. And for those who don't know about you, would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I work at Irish Breakdown, and we are a media outlet that covers Notre Dame. We cover Notre Dame football. We do a little bit with basketball. Sean Steyer's one of our writers, covers stuff for the women's basketball team because they're on fire right now. I do a little bit with the men's basketball team, but obviously with Notre Dame being in the national championship on Monday, that kind of takes precedent over most, right? But yeah, so it's actually a pretty new realm for me. I worked in sales for years before I took this on, but it's been a dream of mine. I've loved Notre Dame. I grew up around South Bend, and so I've loved this team since I was a little kid. So getting this opportunity that Brian Driscoll gave me was awesome. So happy to be here. It's weird looking back. I know everybody kind of has that flashback moment of their year when the new year hits, and starting from where I was to 2024 was crazy. I mean, got married, started this job at Irish Breakdown. So it's been a fun ride. Thanks, man. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. Well, like you said, 2024 has been a wild journey, and it most certainly has been for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish because, like week one, top-notch victory over Texas A&M. Then week two, world's falling apart. On September 7th, 2024, Northern Illinois upsets the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. What was going through the mindset of Notre Dame at that time?
Yeah, I mean, for anybody that wanted a microcosm of what it was like being a Notre Dame fan your entire life, you just kind of had to be a fan from August 31st to September 7th, if I'm being honest with you. Man, I mean, you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows in a calendar week. And it was crazy, man. I mean, you're right. You go down and you beat Texas A&M at College Station, a place where historically, at least during my lifetime, that's not where Notre Dame typically wins. Right, you think of the 2017 Miami game. They go down to South Beach and they get blown out. In 2019, they played Michigan in the Big House, get rolled. And so there's a lot of the narrative coming into this season. And they were able to win 23-13 in week one. And then week two, I think a lot of the fan base, myself included, kind of took on the persona of the team of you look who's on the schedule, you see Northern Illinois, you don't put as much thought into it. It's, hey, listen, our guys just beat an SEC team down in Texas. I mean, yeah, Northern Illinois. And we all found out very quickly that, and this is kind of a testament to the rest of how college football went this season, but anybody can beat anybody on any given weekend. And Notre Dame found that out first. And it was tough, man. I mean, like I said, I started working at Irish Breakdown a couple of weeks before the season started. So my introduction to this world was watching them beat Texas A&M and then lose to Northern Illinois. So, Jack, let me tell you, man, I mean, wild ride is the least that I would say about the start of Notre Dame season for sure, man, for sure.
Well, there were like a lot of people just calling for Marcus Freeman's head at that time. And I think it was like minutes after the game happened, I was saying that Marcus Freeman would have to make sure Notre Dame goes 11-1 or 10-2 just to kind of cool things a little bit. And I think if anything, that game was a reality check because it's like we lose another game, we could be out. And as a matter of fact, And this is something I thought about, and I don't know because I know Thomas Hammock was like the star at that time after Northern Illinois upset Notre Dame. He was going on like the Dan Patrick Show. He was going on Pardon My Take, and he was even going on Fearless with Jason Whitlock on Blaze TV. Even he was going everywhere. You named a show, he was on there, and he said, Coach Freeman, if you want, I can give you some advice. If you want my help, let me know. And that's what I love about Freeman. He was just like, you know what? We'll take it. We'll take any advice we can get. He didn't turn him away. He was like, let's look at the blueprint. What you think about that, man?
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Freeman did everything that he needed to get this season turned around. And I think part of the reason why Notre Dame has had so much success in the postseason is because they've been playing in elimination games since September 14th, right? I mean, it was you lose one more, most likely you're done. And there were some things that happened over the course of the season, right, that maybe Notre Dame would have snuck in at like an 11 seed or a 10 seed, but then you start getting into the topic of, do they deserve to be in? A team that lost to Northern Illinois and one more. And we've said it on our show at Irish Breakdown. If Notre Dame goes 10-2, do they make it in based on the things that happened in front of them? Probably. Did they deserve it? Probably not, because you can't confidently look at this team and say, yes, this is a championship caliber football team right now. But what Marcus Freeman was able to do is he rattled off 10 straight to finish the rest of the season. And right now they're riding a 13-game win streak. So, I think there's a lot of truth to the Northern Illinois loss almost being what the team needed to almost recenter their focus, right? And I know we're getting ready to talk about Notre Dame and Ohio State, but the same could be said for both teams. Both had a really bad loss, and they had one bad day. But the thing that I love about the 12-team playoff, right, is in years past, Notre Dame and Ohio State might not have made the top four, right, to be able to compete and show what they were able to do. And this season, what Marcus Freeman was able to do and what he got out of the team, once you factor in all the injuries, because that's one thing that people don't really know how much the injury bug hit this football team. All the things that he was able to do and overcome to get them to this point is spectacular. It's the best coaching job that I've seen in my lifetime, watching the team and now obviously covering it.
I mean, because like week 3, we talk a little bit about like Notre Dame Purdue as it was on CBS. They smacked Purdue off the face of the earth. I mean, I know it was like a Ryan Walters Purdue team, but still, though, to be able to have that reality check in front of you, and then you're smacking your opponent off the face of the earth, 66-7. That's amazing in of itself.
I mean, the immediate turnaround was something that I think that they needed, because they even talked about it on their documentary, the Here Come the Irish series that's on Peacock. And it was that culture shock, right? They woke up the next morning and they wished that the game never happened, but the reality is it did. And you had a short week to respond, right? There was no, well, maybe we get into the bye and lick our wounds a little bit and see what we can turn around. It was, hey, this sucks. Now let's turn it around in 5 practice days, right? And so to come out and win by 59 points in that fashion, things now, believe me, I was not on the train yet of Notre Dame's back, baby. They just lost to Northern Illinois, but what they did to Purdue, they're back. But everybody needed to see this team move a step in the right direction. And that's exactly what they did on the road against another Power 5 opponent. Now, Purdue obviously ended up being what they were, unfortunately. But it was the win that I think the team needed to take that first step forward, because I think if you come out and you struggle with Purdue, you look sluggish coming out of the gate, the defense is still struggling, I think that would have raised a lot of question marks around, okay, now what is the rest of the season going to look like, right? So they did a lot in the following weeks to kind of keep putting Northern Illinois as far back in the rearview mirror as possible. And I think that starts from the top down. I'm a firm believer that teams take on the persona of their head coach and their coaching staff, their position coaches. And after a loss like Northern Illinois, I think it speaks volumes about the players, the coaches, everybody involved with the program to buy into what a head coach is preaching after one of the worst loss, if not the worst loss of the college football season. You know what I mean? So The turnaround was awesome.
Oh, it has been. And, a lot of people I know were complaining about the Notre Dame schedule, but I don't really think Notre Dame was planning on Florida State just taking a face plant on 2024. I mean, it's like, where it was like all we heard from Florida State was we're going to lead the ACC. And then it was, oh, we're bragging about win against Cal. Whatever. It's like Notre Dame did not plan on Florida State being so terrible. That's the fault of NBC putting that on nighttime.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about scheduling. These come out years in advance. I mean, Notre Dame and Alabama just scheduled each other for, I think, like the 2030 season. I think it's either 29 and 30 or 30 and 31. But I believe Notre Dame and Alabama have a home and home series.
Yep,
Now,
2029, 2030.
Okay. So it's one of those where games like this get scheduled out so far in advance. Who knows what Alabama is going to look like in 29 and 30? Who knows what Notre Dame is going to look like in 29 or 30? Now, if I were a betting man, which I kind of am, I don't think that they're going to have the Florida State type season in 2029 or 2030, either of these programs, right? But again, you just never know, right? And they weren't expecting Florida State to be 2-10. They didn't expect USC to have the kind of season that they did, right? But then on the flip side, I don't think they thought that Navy or Army were going to have the kind of season that they did either. You know what I mean? So,
oh yeah,
expect that you have to tailor it, right? Because Army isn't playing in the Big Ten, Navy isn't playing in the SEC, but they're playing relative to their competition, right? And for both teams being undefeated at the time that Notre Dame played them, I think that's what's so great about college football is you kind of just never know who's going to be good, who's going to be decent till the season starts. I mean, I think Louisville turned some more heads this season than what I think people were predicting at the start of the year. Jeff Brom's a great coach. They picked up Ja'Cory Brooks from Alabama out of the transfer portal. He was a good receiver for him this year. So, some of the games turned out how we thought. I mean, I don't really know if anybody thought that teams like Stanford were going to be world beaters this year. They were kind of on par with what everybody believed. Then there were teams that fell off the face of the earth. I still, to this day, I think what happened at Florida State needs studied. But, I mean, nobody was expecting a season after they go 13-1 to be where they were at, right? So, and Notre Dame went in and handled business, and they won 52-3. So they did to Florida State what you should do to a team that is playing like that. So, you kind of give and take it a little bit.
Well, and I know that Notre Dame didn't expect USC to have the disappointing season that they had. I mean, they weren't counting on USC to lose to Minnesota, lose to Maryland, lose a tight one to Penn State. I mean, good grief. That's just been a terrible USC team this year.
USC was a tough one to cover. And obviously, rivalry games always add a little bit of an extra implication. I know whenever Alabama and Auburn play in the Iron Bowl, it's one of those where it doesn't really matter what the record is of either team. Like you're going to get both of their bests. And that's how it was with USC. But USC was a weird team, man, because they had a lead in every single loss in the fourth quarter. And so it's not like the teams that they were losing to were just blowing them out. They showed that they could beat an LSU on a neutral field, albeit it was week 1. They took Penn State, a good Penn State team, down to the wire to overtime. But again, really good teams finish those games if you have leads in the fourth quarter. So there's the caveat to USC's season. But yeah, I don't think anybody was expecting them to be what they were either. So it was just, again, part of the scheduling that people don't see is you can't really have a crystal ball that looks into the future and says, hey, we know exactly how this team is going to be this season.
Agreed. And we'll talk a little bit about the drought, which has been since 1988. I mean, that's too long for South Bend right there. And going into the playoffs, and a lot of people, including myself, wondered, can we see Notre Dame win the big game in the postseason? I want to see them win the big game postseason. I mean, they showed me that they could when they beat Indiana. But a lot of people were like, not so fast. They still haven't won that big bowl game. What do? They win that big bowl game against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And then we see them beating Penn State in the Orange Bowl, tight fashion. It's like it. That's not a championship team. I don't know what is. I love it.
Yeah, man. I mean, so championship drought since '88. It's been 37 years, and I mean, to make it even worse, they hadn't won a New Year's Six bowl in my lifetime. So I was born in '97, and I started really diving into football and watching Notre Dame the way that I do when I was 8 years old in 2005. Right. And since then, and it's not like they hadn't made it. I watched them lose in the Fiesta Bowl during the '05 season. I watched them lose in the Sugar Bowl to LSU in the '06 season. Obviously, we all know what happened in 2012 in the national championship. And then they play Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl in 2015, playoffs in 2018. So there's all these things that you watch what Notre Dame did in the postseason, and I hadn't seen it either. And covering the team, you had this faith that it was going to happen and you felt good about it, but there was still that little lingering thing in the back of your mind that was, we haven't seen them do it yet. We haven't seen this team get that signature win. I was with you. I think they needed to kind of see, like when a basketball player just needs to see one go through the hoop.
Yeah.
And then they kind of start rolling. I think that's what happened with Notre Dame when they beat Indiana. Especially in the fashion that they did. I don't think the final score really reflects how lopsided that game was. It was 27-3 with 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. What I tell everybody is, look, Indiana had to score a touchdown, recover an onside kick, score a touchdown, get the 2-point conversion to then lose by 10. Right. And so at that point, Notre Dame had called off the dogs and the game was over. But the Sugar Bowl was the one against the SEC champs that was this is the game that Notre Dame can't conquer. Yeah. Because what I would tell people is, look, the playoffs against Indiana, that was a big win on like the stage that it was. But let's just say Notre Dame beat Indiana in the regular season. Nobody's walking away saying, hey, that's Notre Dame's biggest win in the regular season since 1993. You know what I mean? So the Georgia game was it. And yes, they had a backup quarterback. But that backup quarterback was the one that led the comeback in the SEC championship game. And that's the thing that I think people fail to understand. That you compound that with all of Notre Dame's injuries, right? They lose their starting left tackle before the season starts. They lose their starting center in week 3. They lose their starting right guard for a month in week 3. They lost their starting Viper defensive end in week 3. Then they lose his backup 2 weeks later. Ben Morrison goes out. Riley Mills is lost for the postseason against Indiana. And so the injuries just started piling up. But of course, the one that everybody focuses on is the starting quarterback position because it's gets the most magnitude. But, they go in and win a game by 13 points. And I think that's a pretty convincing win. And so that was the one that kind of busted the door down and I think gave the team the confidence that was like, hey, we knew we were a really good football team. Now we have the confidence to believe that we can compete with anybody in the country. Right. And so I think that was my takeaway from the Sugar Bowl.
Well, I will say though, I'm glad that Sean McDonough was there to broadcast that game because like he can add that to his collection of classic games like 93 World Series Game 6, 92 NLCS Game 7, and numerous college football games that he's called, including 09 Nebraska, Virginia Tech, and a few others.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the broadcasting crew was solid. I like Sean McDonough. I like Greg McElroy. They did, I believe they did all 3 of Notre Dame's postseason games. So
yeah, McDonald even threw out the puberty voice when Notre Dame kicked that game-winning field goal against Penn State.
We got the patented voice crack.
Yeah. And it's good.
No, that game took years off of my life. It was back and forth. But the ending of the game, it was a tale of 2 different halves. Notre Dame rushed for 15 yards in the entire first half. They doubled that in their first 3 runs of the second. And so you go through and you look at what this team started to do. They started passing the ball down the field more, which is, I believe, is the one thing that's holding people back from saying, hey, this is a really good Notre Dame football team, is because they don't have that patented downfield passing attack, or they don't have the Jeremiah Smiths, the Ryan Williams. They don't have that guy. Like, they don't even have the Arian Smiths by reputation, right? It's just they have a really good, talented group of guys. That's just the style of the offense doesn't dictate for them throwing the ball 40 times a game, And so I think that feeds into it, but we saw a little bit of it against Penn State. And again, this team found a way to win at some moments where it just felt like it was getting real close to the end.
Yeah.
Real close. But the way the team battled back was fantastic, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Greathouse making some huge plays for Notre Dame in that game. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, his ability to come off the line the way that he did, he gave him a really good move at the line, corner falls, and makes a good move in the open field, takes it in for the touchdown, ties it 24-24. Penn State had the ball with a little bit under a minute left. I think it was like 54 seconds left on the clock to drive down the field and score. Ran one play, and then on the following play, they threw the interception to Christian Gray. And Notre Dame was able to capitalize. That's been the one thing with this team that throughout the playoffs, previous Notre Dame teams were not able to capitalize on the moment. Right. They weren't able to get that game-ending interception. They weren't able to make the game-winning field goal. They weren't able to battle back from a deficit. And Notre Dame this season has shown that they can win all different types of football games, but they hadn't trailed at halftime since Northern Illinois, which, yeah, I know. So on one hand, heck of a finish to the season, really, after September 7th of being that dominant in that fashion, not trailing in any game until the Orange Bowl outside of the loss to Northern Illinois. And they came back and battled and did what they needed to, and also went through more injuries as that game went on. Their starting boundary receiver, calf strain, ruled out the rest of the game. Starting right guard, injured his ankle again, ruled out for the rest of the game. And then their left tackle, Anthony Knapp, also went down with an injury, and all that happened in the first half. And Anthony Knapp has now been ruled out for the national championship game. So as if the injury bug couldn't keep compounding for the Irish, it's still here. But if there's one thing that this team has shown, hopefully most of the college football world, is that they're resilient, and the next man in mentality has been constant throughout this year.
Well, and somebody asked me the other day, who is more likely to beat Ohio State, Notre Dame or Penn State? For me, I said Notre Dame because we saw it in 2023. They almost beat Ohio State. All they got to do is look at how many men they got on defense. They're good to go. Penn State, they're just like Charlie Brown trying to get that football away from Lucy. They can't get it done.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask me that too. And one, I am happy that it's not just a sole Big Ten matchup in the championship game, right? I'm happy that Notre Dame has made it in for a multitude of reasons. But I mean, one, we've already seen it this year. We watched Ohio State and Penn State play, and Penn State scored 0 offensive touchdowns in that game. It's not really going to get it done against Ohio State, not with your offense putting up 0 touchdowns, right? Their only touchdown of the game was on a pick 6 on Ohio State's first offensive possession. And so you go through, and then you just start to look about, like Brian has this saying, and it's just football is a game of matchups, right? Don't pay attention to the programs. Don't pay attention to the team names. Take that away and you evaluate the athletes for what they are. You know what I mean? And I think Notre Dame also matches up well with Ohio State. The things that Ohio State does well, Notre Dame does well. The things that Notre Dame does well, Ohio State does well, which I think is what makes this matchup so intriguing to cover. But you go through and you look at it, and it's there were a lot of questions around who beats this Ohio State team, because they looked the most dominant team in college football in the postseason. They beat Tennessee, they put up 42, they beat Oregon in a rematch, 41-21 in the Rose Bowl. Then they face a Texas team, and Texas to me is relatively on defense comparable to what Notre Dame is. They're big, they're fast, they're physical. Ohio State's defense or offense struggled to put up points. They scored 21 offensive points against Texas. Not saying that because that happened against Texas, Notre Dame can hold them to 21 or under, but it gives you a little bit more of a gauge. I mean, I've gone on record saying that if Ohio State did what they did to Texas, what they did to Tennessee and Oregon, I would not feel as confident about this national championship matchup as I do right now. Because sometimes when a team is hot and they're playing that well, sometimes you just got to tip your cap to them,
There you go.
But
Well, and Texas gave a little bit of that blueprint by putting a ton of pressure on Will Howard, and I think what helped Texas a little bit was the fact that Jeremiah Smith had 3 receiving yards in that game. That's not like the performance against Tennessee and Oregon, and but unfortunately, had Texas not gotten in their own way on offense, they probably it would have been a little bit better than losing by 2 touchdowns, or better yet, it would have been closer than the experts had it. But Ohio State, again, had they not had so many penalties, they had like 9 penalties in that game. Had they not had a bunch of penalties, it would have been much more in 28-14.
Yeah. I mean, you go through and you watch how that game unfolded, and Texas really wasn't able to generate a whole lot on the perimeter. I mean, Quinn Ewers' 2 passing touchdowns were both to Jadon Blue. They're like receiving back, essentially. You go through and you pay attention to what that matchup was, and you brought up Jeremiah Smith being held to 1 catch for 3 yards. And there is a direct correlation, and this has been constant throughout their entire season. When Jeremiah Smith is contained, because the expectation of no Notre Dame fan should be, well, now Leonard Moore and Christian Gray should hold him to 1 catch for 3 yards. Like, it's Jeremiah Smith, right? I mean, he's one of the best receivers in college football as a true freshman. I think that standard's pretty unrealistic, but there is a pattern of when Jeremiah Smith does not have a Jeremiah Smith-esque type of game, like what he did to Tennessee, what he did to Oregon both times, what he did to start the season. Ohio State's offense struggles more than what people think it does. Against Penn State, he didn't have the best game. He didn't have a bad game, but he didn't have the best game. Ohio State scored 20 points on offense. You go through and you look at the Nebraska game, and yet he had 70 yards receiving off of 3 catches. One of those was a 60-yard touchdown. Outside of that, he had 2 catches for 10 yards. Ohio State scored 21 points on offense. You look at the Michigan game, when Michigan was without Will Johnson, their best cover corner. And Jeremiah Smith, I believe, had like 4 catches or 5 catches for 35 yards and a touchdown, but he got 1 target the entire second half. They put up 10 points on offense. You look at the Texas game. He had 1 catch for 3 yards. Offensively, they put up 21 points. So there is a correlation between what Jeremiah Smith does for the offense and the lack of points that they do put up. And to some that might sound elementary. Like, of course, Trev, their best player doesn't become a game wrecker and they don't put up as many points. But that's kind of the trend that we've seen with Ohio State this season. With all the great weapons that they have, it's still focused around their wide receiver one, similar to last year, right, when they had Marvin Harrison. So, for Notre Dame, they're coming off of a game where they allowed 0 receptions and 0 yards to Penn State's wide receiving core, which is one of the crazier stats that I've seen watching college football. So, it's going to be, again, that's why I said at the start of the show that these matchups are more even than what some people believe it to be, contrary to what the national media thinks and contrary to what some of the pundits say. Notre Dame does match up pretty well in some areas against Ohio State. That's why I think this game's going to be so fun.
Agreed. And I think Leonard will have to have a good enough game against the Buckeyes. Like, he's going to have to make more big plays with Greathouse. And we're going to have to see more big plays from Jeremiah Love. And we got to see some big plays from the special teams as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to have to be a solid game from all 3 phases: offense, defense, special teams. The thing that I've loved about Riley Leonard is also some of the things that frustrate me the most about him, because he's been so fun to watch. He has. And in the postseason, in every single game, he's done what he's needed to, right? Like, he's not, everybody knows this by now, he's not the Joe Burrow passer, right? He's not going to go up and pass for 400 yards. But he's also not the Lamar Jackson where any game he can go and rush for 130 yards, but he does what he needs to. Basically, whatever the game dictates, Riley Leonard does that. Against Indiana, they just, hey, man, don't turn the ball over, run the offense, play point guard. There's going to be a point where we need you to kind of step up and make a play. And he did that late in the fourth quarter to put the game away, or not late in the fourth quarter, early in the fourth quarter, to put the game away. Steps up into the pocket, hits Jordan Faison for a deep post route, puts him in scoring range. He runs it in for a touchdown. Against Georgia, The running backs, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, weren't able to get going. So Riley Leonard, the tagline that everybody walks away from the Sugar Bowl is, Riley Leonard passed for 90 yards. It's like, he did. He also rushed for 80. He was the team's leading rusher. He had 80 rushing yards on 14 carries. Against Penn State, they needed him to be more of a downfield passer, and they needed him to be efficient. And unfortunately, he had 2 poorly timed interceptions, but they were because he was looking to be aggressive and push the ball down the field, right? But then you go and look at the efficiency numbers. Jaden Greathouse had 7 catches on 7 targets. Aeneas Williams, a true freshman running back, he had 5 receptions on 5 targets. Mitchell Evans had the most targets he's had all season. He's kind of been that one player that everybody's kind of been waiting for that breakout because of the season he had last year before he tore his ACL. And Mitchell Evans had 5 receptions on 9 targets. And so, yeah, Jack, I mean, you're completely right. Riley Leonard's going to have to play well, but in both of the phases, with his legs and with his arms, to beat Ohio State.
Agreed. And we look at the score prediction for the national title game. I hope Notre Dame wins it all, but for right now, I've got the Buckeyes winning a tight one, but I will be pulling heavily for Notre Dame because what can I say? I'm a sucker for teams that need to end national title droughts.
I appreciate it, man. I'll be pulling for them too. I don't have my official score prediction ready yet because we haven't put ours out for Irish Breakdown, but I do have Notre Dame winning this one. I don't think that's really a surprise to anybody, but like I said, in years past, Notre Dame goes into this game and there was a clear mismatch at the coordinator position or the athletes on either side of the field, right? You go through and you look at the 2015 Notre Dame-Ohio State game. Brian Van Gorder, Notre Dame's defensive coordinator at the time, is not going toe for toe with Urban Meyer. You even look at the game last year. I have a lot of respect for Jim Knowles and what he's done with that Ohio State defense. Jared Parker was a first-time offensive coordinator, not first year at Notre Dame, a first-time offensive coordinator. And he's going toe-to-toe with Jim Knowles, right? You go and you look at the 2020 playoff game, and Tommy Rees is going up against an Alabama defense. And so it's just there's mismatches, right? But this year, where it counts, Notre Dame has Al Golden, who's led a tremendous defense in back-to-back years. He's in his 3rd year, similar to Jim Knowles at Ohio State. And they got Mike Denbrock from LSU, who I think is one of the more decorated offensive coordinators in college football, especially what he did with LSU the past couple of years. He's had a couple stints in South Bend. So I think the talent and the athleticism that this team has, compounded with the coordinators that they have on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, I think it evens the playing field a little bit for what Notre Dame has going into this one.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned LSU because it's like I keep laughing my butt off at Brian Kelly where he goes, "Oh, I'm leaving Notre Dame for LSU because I'll have an easier shot at winning a national title." But then it's like earlier this week, which I think he was talking with Brandon Marcello from 247 Sports or somebody, I'm not sure, but he was saying, "I never said that." Whatever. Roll the film up, Jamie.
Yeah, I was about to say we have the receipts. He definitely said it. He definitely look. It is interesting watching Brian Kelly coach down at LSU because you hear some of the excuses that are being made, stuff about the transfer portal and recruiting's hard, and when he's not the head coach of your team, it sounds ridiculous. But when he is the head coach of your team, like he was at Notre Dame for so long, you buy into it a little bit because if that's what the coach is saying, he's the head coach of this team. I'm not, so obviously he's seeing things that I'm not, but he went to LSU because recruiting at Notre Dame is hard and he had to shop down a specific aisle and all this other stuff, all things that he's been quoted at saying. And the same things are starting to follow him now to LSU. And it is interesting looking at it outside in now when he's not your coach that's speaking about it. So it's definitely interesting, to say the least.
Oh, yeah. And, he will never lead LSU to a playoff victory. That I can guarantee. We will never see that in Baton Rouge as long as Brian Kelly's the head coach. We're not seeing an SEC title. We may see them finish in top 4. We may see them in the playoffs, but there's not going to be a single playoff victory in Baton Rouge as long as Brian Kelly's head coach. And LSU fans, they are wondering, why did we bring this guy again? I mean, this has Jimbo Fisher vibes written all over it.
No, that's a good comparison. I mean, look, when Brian Kelly was in South Bend, it was always tampering down the expectations, right? To the point where if he were to exceed the expectations that he set upon himself, it was supposed to be this miraculous victory, right? And I will say, and as tough as it is, I'm somebody that will always give credit where credit is due. Brian Kelly had multiple undefeated seasons at Notre Dame, took him to multiple playoffs. But again, the issue was, like we've talked about, they were never able to win those games.
Nope.
And it was always, a lot of hats were hung on moral victories. Notre Dame goes and gets blown out in the playoffs, but then the narrative isn't they got blown out in the playoffs. It was, well, we didn't get blown out as bad as that team, which is a dark place to live. That's not where you want to be. So this season, the way that it's unfolded for Notre Dame has been I can't even say a breath of fresh air, because I never knew what that air tasted like prior to Marcus Freeman doing what he did this season. So it's definitely been really fun to be a part of. It's been a crazy ride, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's been making magic for Notre Dame, and it's like Brian Kelly could not win those big games. Charlie Weiss, we know he couldn't. He's just like,
yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I saw that facial expression quite a bit. That was like my introduction to college football was Charlie Weiss being Notre Dame's head coach.
Oh, no.
You
poor thing, man.
Yeah, it's been a long road for us Notre Dame fans, man. But if you would have told me that I had to go through the years of what I experienced to get to this point now and watching this team do what they're doing, I'd probably take you up on it, because it's weird. Like I'm in a spot legitimately where I've never been as a college football fan, because I cover the team and I work as an analyst with Brian and I'm a staff writer, but at the end of the day, I'm still a Notre Dame fan, and that to me has been really exciting to watch how this team's responded all year. I mean, even in the moments where I'm like, it's over, they're done, the magic's run out, they just find another way to keep winning, and it's because they have really good coaches and really good players.
Well, I promise Notre Dame Nation, they're going to be very happy. Like, they think they're happy now, but they're going to be very happy in the years to come.
Man, listen, Jack, I hope you're right. I believe that you're right too. They got their guy. No. The final question that we needed answered was, is Marcus Freeman a championship caliber head coach? And, a lot of those questions are going to be answered on Monday night, because whether it's a win or a loss, and like I said, I do predict them to win, but whether it's a win or a loss, if Notre Dame goes and they battle for 4 quarters and it's just Ohio State's the better team that night, not a whole lot you can ask, because at some point, you're like, this is now the stage where you are either the best team in college football or you are the second best team in college football. And if that's the case for Notre Dame, and if it's the latter, you get back to the drawing board and, hey, what do we need to get us over that one last game? Because now Notre Dame fans, their coaching staff, the players can legitimately say, hey, we're close, right? We were a game away. We were a possession away. Now, unfortunately, if the game ends up in like a blowout and Ohio State rolls, then it's a little bit more of a discussion on this hypothetical drawing board.
Right.
But Notre Dame has their guy. Marcus Freeman is going to be the coach that leads Notre Dame to their next national championship. I think now it's just a question as to when.
Agreed. And if Notre Dame was to win it all Monday night, not only does the title drought end, but Marcus Freeman will be the 5th coach to lead Notre Dame to a national title in his 3rd year. The other 4 were Frank Leahy, Ara Parseghi, Lou Holtz, and Dan Devine.
Yep. Yeah, his name will get put up there. I mean, again, if Marcus Freeman brings it all home and the team brings it all home on Monday night, there will be a statue of him up in South Bend. Probably it'll just be when he retires. But, yeah, he adds his name amongst an elite group, and he's going to be among some pretty high-caliber company up there in South Bend. But, yeah, I mean, already it's been a historic season for him, right? Notre Dame had never had a 13-game winning season in the history of their program, and they did that after getting the win over Georgia. And they hadn't won a New Year's Six Bowl since 1993. They won 2 in the span of a week, And so, you get to this point, you look back at the season, and we get questions all the time at Irish Breakdown. It's like, hey, if Notre Dame loses this game, is the season a disappointment? If they lose this game, is the season a disappointment? Now I think everybody. Now I will say it does kind of depend on the manner of if they do lose in the national championship, how that goes down, because that will be the last memory of how this went down. But I don't think there's a single outcome, on Monday night where you walk away and say that this season was a disappointment, because the wins, the bowl wins, the injuries that you had to overcome, I don't think many people expected them to get to this point, right? And so the fact that they're here on this stage is pretty spectacular.
Well, we know there's going to be some people just complaining and griping about, oh, no, that's not the conference. No, that's not the conference. You know what I think it is? I think they're jealous of the fact that they wish they had Notre Dame's schedule. It's like, some people that are like jealous of this, that, and that. It's like, oh, well, must be nice to have all this time or this, that, and the other. But it's like, come on. You're jealous that Notre Dame can make their own schedule.
I think not only are they jealous that Notre Dame can make their own schedule, I think they're jealous at the fact that Notre Dame is also able to have success with it too, right? I mean, that's the thing, right? Because if Notre Dame was independent, but they went 6-6 every year, I don't think people are going to be complaining that they're independent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And look, I think what some people fail to remember, and honestly, I can't even coin this like I knew this all along. Brian talked about this in one of the other shows, but there were a good amount of teams that were independent back in the late 80s, early 90s. I mean, Penn State was independent. Florida State was independent. West Virginia was independent. Notre Dame was still independent, obviously. And those were the more dominant teams in college football in that era. And so I think Notre Dame they've been able to continue with it. They've stayed successful. And now, obviously, in the world of NIL and the transfer portal, and now it's very open how much money teams are making when they keep advancing in the playoffs. I think now there's this stigma of like, well, Notre Dame gets it all to themselves. It's like, yes, they are independent. Who would they split it with? It's like they earned that. They didn't get paid that much money for being independent. They got paid that much money for making it to the national championship, for making it to the semifinals, for making it to the quarterfinals. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing. But I mean, the thing that I respect about Marcus Freeman, they asked him a lot about it in his press conference with James Franklin for the Orange Bowl. And he's just a football guy, honestly, at the end of the day. He was like, look, I like that we're independent. Pete Bravacqua, their athletic director, likes that they're independent. But if the day ever comes that Notre Dame is forced to join a conference, Marcus Freeman's answer is like, then I'll prepare the team to play a conference schedule. Like there is no, he's like, look, there's things that are handled that are above my pay grade. I am hired and paid to coach this football team. And that's against any opponent. That's against any conference. And that's, again, it's just why you love guys like Marcus Freeman is he doesn't get too hung up in the stuff that he has no control over, but he has control over the success of his football team. So that's why you love the guy.
And unlike Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman controls his emotions very well. He doesn't, he lets logic take over. He doesn't go by emotion. That's what I like about Marcus Freeman. And, the people that are complaining about like Notre Dame being independent, they've also like, there's been like a few others that have like called for, and now I haven't heard like national writers call for this yet, but I know it's just been like numerous fans just screaming at the top of their lungs for, if Notre Dame's not going to leave their independence, then our conference shouldn't just schedule Notre Dame anymore. We're going to ostracize them until they do what we want to. It's like, come on, you're a bunch of grown men acting like high school girls when you do that. Oh, I'm going to ostracize this person until they give in. Yeah, that just makes me like the stance even more.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, like everybody wants Notre Dame to join a conference, and now it's to the point where they don't care which conference it is. I truly don't think it matters. I really don't. Like, at the end of the day, Notre Dame is still going to play teams from multiple conferences, right? I mean, you have those stories about James Franklin complaining that Penn State had to go all the way out to the West Coast. And it's like, hey, man, I hate to break it to you. One, the Big Ten made the decision to add a team like USC. Notre Dame travels out to the West Coast at least once a year, every single year, when they play USC or Stanford to finish their season. So now you just get a glimpse of what Notre Dame players and coaches do on a year-to-year basis. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, to finish their season, they had Senior Day in South Bend. flew out to New York to play Army in the Shamrock Series inside of Yankee Stadium. Then the week after that, they flew out to play USC in the Coliseum. And it's interesting hearing other people's takes because, like I said, Notre Dame has been independent, like outside of COVID, for the entire time that I've watched them. And so to me, like that's just a football season. Like it's like, yeah, where are you guys going this week? Texas. Cool. What about after that? We're back in South Bend. How about after that? Yeah, we're going to North Carolina. Yeah. And so like that's just kind of what a football season has been like for me. So it is interesting being on the outside of somebody that doesn't care if Notre Dame is in a conference. You know, I mean, you go through and you talk about the teams where I had somebody ask me, do you think Notre Dame should play in a conference because, you know, they don't have to play in a conference championship? Is that an advantage in the playoffs? And it's like, well, Ohio State didn't play in a conference championship this year. They played 12 regular season games and then still hosted a home playoff game. So should they be penalized for it as well? You know what I mean? And so it's just
rules for thee, not for me.
Right. I mean, you know, now you're in a spot where this is why the 12-team playoff is good, right? Because you look at who each team beat to get there. Notre Dame beat the SEC champs. They beat the second-place team in the Big Ten and the fourth-place team in the Big Ten. Ohio State beat the Big Ten champs, the runner-ups in the SEC, and third place in the SEC. And so it kind of nullifies in my opinion, well, you have to play in a conference because it's like, okay, well, all 5 of the conference winners lost their first game in the playoffs. So let's just say Notre Dame joins a conference and wins. That doesn't automatically make them one of the better teams in college football, right? And so that's my 2 cents on it, at least. But I also take a little bit of the Marcus Freeman approach when it's just like, if Notre Dame is ever asked to join a conference, I'm not going to throw my hands up and say that it's a travesty and Notre Dame should boycott college football because they were forced to join a conference. I think it's just, all right, well,
we're in a conference.
You know, giddy up. Let's go play 12 games. You know what I mean? Okay. So that's my take on it, man. I mean, if Notre Dame is ever forced to join a conference, they're forced to join a conference.
I mean, if they are, I'm thinking that they could leave the ACC and other sports. Like if we see, like, say, Florida State, Clemson, be like, you know what, we're leaving the ACC. I'm not saying it'll happen now, but I'm thinking like many years down the road, because I think the SEC is going to try to get the 20 teams before the Big Ten does.
And yeah. I mean, it's so let me ask you this, kind of flip it with you being an Alabama fan, you cover the team. What is your opinion on like the people call them super conferences, you know, with the Big Ten getting to 18 teams, the SEC is adding teams every year. What are your thoughts on it? Are you impartial? Do you want it to go back to smaller? What do you think?
You know, I've been thinking about this because, I mean, on the one hand, I like seeing 18 teams in Big Ten, 16 to SEC. But on the other hand, I kind of want it to be like we go back to the Southwest Conference. We go back to the Big 8. We go back, and I'll do one even better. We put Penn State in the same conference with Pittsburgh, West Virginia, and those schools. Because, I mean, how has the Gen Z generation not know about Penn State, Pittsburgh? Which, I mean, I get it. Like, they only know about 2016 through 2019. But it's like, it's just a shame that people don't know about that rivalry. Or like Florida, Miami. Nobody knows about Florida, Miami that much. I mean, it's just like I really dislike the fact that there's been so many rivalries that not a lot of people know about. It's just a crying shame.
Yeah, with this one, I'm on both sides of the fence because I see the benefit of both sides, right? Because you look at Texas joining the SEC. Now they and Texas A&M can play. You know, you look at the even playing field now that Georgia isn't in the SEC East, now they have to have a tough regular season schedule. You know, it can't just be, all right, well, the hardest team that we play this year is Florida in the Swamp. Outside of that, we're playing Vandy and we're playing, you know, Kentucky and you know, so now they have a tough regular season schedule and they performed well in it this year, right? Like there's a reason why they went on to win the SEC but then on the flip side, I think it's also tough to gauge how good some teams are. Like in the Big Ten, you have 18 teams. There's no way that you can even play close to half. You know what I mean? Or you can play about half, but it kind of depends on what those halves are. You look at a team like Indiana, the first ranked team that they played all year, Ohio State beat them 38-15. I mean, when you have a conference with 18 teams, it's tough. I think I talked about it back when Notre Dame and Indiana were getting ready to play, but I think they played like 8 teams with a losing record this year. And so I think when the conferences get that big, it's just tough to schedule the way that you need to because, Indiana, they didn't play in the regular season. I mean, they didn't play Oregon. They didn't play USC. They didn't play Wisconsin. They didn't play Nebraska, or they did play Nebraska. Sorry. They dominated Nebraska. It was like
56-7 on bid noon kickoff.
Yep, I forgot about that. But they go through and they didn't play a lot of these better Big Ten teams. So I think it's tough to gauge who is really the best in those conferences. You know what I mean? So for me, I'm on both sides of the fence. I just didn't know what your thoughts were on it, man.
I just wish the SEC and Big 12 could trade teams, like say the SEC trades Missouri to the Big 12, and in return, the SEC gets Oklahoma State. So this way, the Bedlam rivalry comes back on an annual basis, and Missouri-Kansas comes back on an annual basis.
Yeah, no, that would be cool. The going away from rivalries is tough. The one new trend that I've been hearing is now mind you, this is not meant to be a shot. This is just something that I had heard in one of our chats, was that according to some Ohio State fans, rivalries don't matter anymore. Now it's what happens in the postseason. It's like, okay, well now rivalries seem to matter a whole heck of a lot when you were 14-0 in 14 years against Michigan. And now that you're 0-4 in the last 4 years, now they don't matter. I think that's a little bit of interesting timing. We'll leave it at that. But yeah, I love college football rivalries, man. I think that's what makes it so great.
Yeah. I mean, like without Alabama, Auburn, Notre Dame, USC, Ohio State, Michigan, Texas, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, A&M, and a few other rivalries, it would suck.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would be like, it would kind of be like the NFL where it's like the rivalries are like divisional, but like even that, I went to the Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens game this year that went into overtime. And, it was Joe Burrow. It was Lamar Jackson. Game goes into overtime. Dude, people were getting up and leaving in the middle of the third quarter so they didn't have to sit in traffic. Like, you're going to tell me that happens at the Iron Bowl? You're going to tell me that happens at Notre Dame, USC, or at Ohio State, Michigan? No. And so, yeah, I think rivalries are what makes college football great. The one that I want to see come back, because it's the one that I grew up watching, they don't play for a trophy. It's just two teams that don't like each other. I wish Notre Dame and Michigan played each other.
Right. I mean, I think NBC, Fox, and CBS are definitely going to have a chat in the offseason with the Big Ten being like, hey, the ratings were astronomical for Notre Dame, Ohio State. I mean, nobody's getting excited over Notre Dame, Virginia. I mean, people got more excited for Notre Dame, Purdue. Let's say we get Notre Dame, Michigan come back. I mean, like they're going to come back in 2033, but I doubt we're waiting that long. It's either going to be in a college football playoff matchup, or they're going to see to it that they move it up to the late 2020s. Because, I mean, nobody is waiting another decade for that.
I certainly don't. I don't want to wait that long. I that was a rivalry that I grew up watching, and it's like the tagline was always just, they don't like us, we don't like them. In 2005, Notre Dame beats Michigan in the Big House. 2006, they run Notre Dame in South Bend. 2007 was just a bad year all around for Notre Dame.
I keep thinking about like the jump ball where it's like overhead. Boom.
Yeah. I mean, they had Notre Dame and Michigan played in the first night game in the Big House, like ever. The first night game ever in the Big House was Notre Dame, Michigan. And that was a fantastic game. I mean, not for Notre Dame because they ended up losing, but from just a football game standpoint, it's what you want out of a rivalry. Two programs that they don't like each other. It's especially like proximity, like it's some of the lines now are just, who's going to be the Kings of the North. Everybody believed it to be Ohio State. Penn State's been trying to knock on the door for what feels like the better part of a decade. And Notre Dame has been trying to knock on the door for the better part of a decade of, hey, if football, like if you are going to, another thing that Brian says that I love is, if you're going to be the best team in the country, you have to be the best team in your region first. You know, like you go through and you look at, I mean, Alabama didn't get there with Nick Saban until they were able to beat Florida, right? The Urban Meyer Florida team, you know, and Clemson wasn't able to get there until they found a way to beat, you know, South Carolina because they had their number for a while. Georgia wasn't able to do it until they beat Alabama, you know, and so you have all of these. I mean, Michigan wasn't able to get to the national stage until they beat Ohio State. And so especially if Notre Dame wins the national championship this year, with, you know, the 2023 winner being Michigan, this year's winner being Notre Dame, I would love for that game to come back and just, I miss it. That's the one after, especially because I think their last game, it was not close. Notre Dame played Michigan in the Big House, and it was like 49-14 or something. It was not good. It was a bad game.
That 2019 game, that was a huge loss.
I mean, that was, again, I know we've talked about him quite a bit on the show, but that was a Brian Kelly special. I mean, the players just looked like, the second it got cold and rainy, the players just didn't even look like they wanted to be there, man.
No, it's like downtown Clarks. I'm not even supposed to be here today. You don't see that with Marcus Freeman. They'll win at home, they'll win on the road.
Yeah. I mean, you could make the argument that they've had more success on the road, which is crazy to say. I mean, the loss to Northern Illinois was at home. The loss to Marshall was at home. The loss to 2022 Stanford was at home, you know, but some of the bigger wins have been on the road. You know, they've had really big wins under Marcus Freeman at home too. I mean, the 2022 Clemson game when they were ranked 4th, Notre Dame wins 35-14. You know, they battled Ohio State very close at home, lost 17-14 last year. Stomped USC 48-20 when they were undefeated and had Caleb Williams at home last year. So, yeah, I was at both of those games. I was at the Ohio State Notre Dame game last year and the Notre Dame USC game. I can tell you I was significantly happier leaving the USC game last year than I was the Ohio State game.
There you go. And you know, on the bright side, we will see Notre Dame, Michigan State come back in 2026 on the 60th anniversary of the magnificent 10-10 tie game between Notre Dame and Michigan State.
Yeah, that 10-10 tie game was in 66. Yeah, that was another good rivalry. Like, great games with both Michigan and Michigan State, but you know, they had the overtime loss at home in 2005. They had the 19-point fourth quarter comeback win in the middle of a monsoon in 2006. You know, they in really underrated Notre Dame Michigan State game was the 2013 win Notre Dame had at home. Like, Michigan State went on to be like an 11-win football team that year, you know, but that's one that kind of gets swept under the rug. And then in 2017, Notre Dame beat a good Michigan State team. I think that Michigan State team beat Ohio State.
Yep. I remember in 2013, like that game, I was picking games with somebody and we were like bet money or something. And this was like the end of the first half. Like, this guy was like I'm just a 15-year-old kid betting on college football with, it was like one of my uncle's friends. He's like calling me on the phone, shooting his mouth off about, Notre Dame's gonna get beat, Jack. They're gonna get beat. You're gonna have to do this. You're gonna do this. It's like, hey, game's not over yet. What happens? Notre Dame beats Michigan State. It's like, don't throw the cart in before the horse.
Yeah, no, I remember that game. That was a good game. That was the first time we saw Will Fuller in a Notre Dame uniform. He was a true freshman. Gosh, I miss him. But yeah, I mean, it was that was a good game between them. They played 2017. I think 2017 might have been the last time Notre Dame and Michigan State played. So,
I'm afraid so.
Battle for the megaphone.
So, let's come back.
Yeah,
I'm so excited about it. When that game does come back. I'm gonna be playing the Charlie Brown song. I'm gonna be so happy about it. And you know, and the people that are complaining about Notre Dame not being in conference, like, once Notre Dame's in a conference, I'm sure they're gonna find something else to complain about because they got nothing going on.
Oh yeah. Well, if Notre Dame is ever forced to join a conference, then it's gonna be, well, why did you join that conference? Like, it's not, you know what I mean? Like, I've grown up a Notre Dame fan. There's always gonna be something, you know. I mean, it was, you know, before they beat Indiana, as well, you're not even the best team in the state. And then they beat Indiana.
We got Moose. We got Moose in chat. What's up, Moose? How you doing tonight, good buddy? I think Notre Dame Michigan will be a toss up for 2025, but we'll know more about that in the summer as I'll be carrying around the preseason magazines with me like I'm Linus with the blanket.
That's awesome.
So, well, Trevor, for those who don't know about what you got going on Irish Breakdown, where can they find you?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at ttro5. And then the best way to support what we do, if you go to just irishbreakdown.com, that's the website. You can check us out there. And then we have our premium message boards, and that's just boards.irishbreakdown.com. But everything that we do, we have a YouTube channel. We go live every day, well, mostly every day at 1 o'clock, and we're either covering Notre Dame's opponent, transfer portal. There's a good amount of times that we like to give back to a lot of our listeners. We'll do mailbags. We have fun segments like a buy, sell, hold where you can submit topics on the premium message boards. So we're all around. We're everywhere. So you guys can find us, and you can. It's not just specific to Notre Dame. Irish Gordy, not he's a routine listener with us. I met him at one of the tailgates, and he can attest. It's not just Notre Dame content. We talk all things college football. So yeah, come check us out, guys. It's a lot of fun over there.
There we go. I agree, Irish Gordon. He rocks, man. He's a go-to on Notre Dame football. He and Brian Driscoll and everybody at Irish Breakdown are the go-to for Notre Dame football. I mean, like for me, they are, and they should be too. Like for all of you.
Well, appreciate that, Jack. Yeah, we got a good crew of guys over there. Brian, Vince, Sean, they're all awesome.
There we go. And I am 106 subs away on the magic number 500 on Jackson Johnson 979, where I not only host Jacksonian episodes with Trevor Trowbridge and many other wonderful people that come on the show, but I also do the pits analysis and the final whistle with Austin Williams from Sports Talk with Austin. And I also host the Buzzer Beater with Will and D as we talk a lot about the latest on college basketball. And of course, I'm 490. Well, Alabama at the Voice College Football is 490 subs away from that magic number 3,000. We may not beat the Texas channel at 3,000, but we can beat them at 4,000. I mean, who says Bama doesn't run the SEC? Texas may have gotten to the playoffs, but that doesn't mean they run the SEC, especially on the Voice of College Football. And of course, we have the latest episode, Crimson Tide Live, where my co-host Johnny Burtz and myself go over what went wrong in 2024 and how we can move on from there. And we also talked a little bit about Nick Saban being inducted in the College Football Hall of Fame and much, much more. And of course, you can check us out on Alabama with the Voice College Football Mondays at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, where Johnny Burtz and I host Crimson Tide Live for Alabama with the Voice College Football. And of course, we also host, it's not just me and Johnny. It's Jeffrey at Only Talk Sports and I taking your calls on the Alabama Call-In Show, 9 p.m. Central Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, where we discuss with you on your Alabama football takes. We don't care that you're a Bama man, Auburn man, Tennessee man, Ohio State, Notre Dame man. We don't care who you pull for. We just want you to come on in and discuss Alabama football with us. We want you to come on in. And for more updates on what's going on the Jacksonian and on Alabama with the Voice College Football, you can check me out on X at JacksonVOCFB and on Instagram and Threads at Jackson Johnson 543908. But if you don't like those apps, come on in and check me out on Blue Sky. Because I mean, I got some stuff going on there. You know, it's like I'm here, I'm there, I'm there. I'm like Droopy Dog, where it's like the wolf is just like trying to hide from him, but it's just like, hey, I'm there, hey. But I've got some magic cooking. And episode 60, watch for the release of episode 60 Tuesday night, where I will have Tyler Rowland from Locked On Titans, where we have basically a venting session about the Tennessee Titans. And I can tell you, it'll be a wild ride. Do we want Cam Ward? Do we not want Cam Ward? Do we want Shedeur Sanders? Like, what's the plan? What do we do, Scoob? What do we do? Well, it'll be all right here on the Jacksonian. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it. Y'all have an awesome night. Like, comment, subscribe, click on the notification bell so you never miss no video whatsoever or another episode whatsoever. We will see you soon. Stay safe, stay warm. It's cold out.